Hello my fellow paint monsters, how are you today? My name is Aga and this is Hungry for Paint, a channel dedicated entirely to handmade watercolor paints. Today I've got a review video for you. I'm going to be testing paints by Designs by Rachel Beth, based in the USA in Idaho. So here I've got the set Let's Go Camping for you. This is not my only set, actually I have three. I usually keep them in my big watercolor tin. I'll show you. Here's my big tin, okay. I've got most of my handmade watercolors in here. I like to have them all together so I can use them easily when I paint. But for you, I put them back. I put these back into their original tin. Now, apart from the set Let's Go Camping, I've also got Latte Date and Toes in the Sand. Actually, I was a bit on the fence about buying this last one, Toes in the Sand, because personally I'm not a huge fan of pastel colors, but I'm very glad that I actually did get it. This color, Sandy Beach. It makes a wonderful skin tone. If you don't want to mix your own, this is perfect. It is my go-to whenever I don't feel like mixing my own skin tone. Now, let's get down to the swatching, shall we? The reason why I chose those paints to be the first paints I review for you is these were the first handmade watercolors I have ever bought. So they're kind of special for me, and they were sort of an entry point for me into the world of handmade watercolors. You can see that most of these colors are pretty opaque, especially peppermint mocha and espresso, also foam and toasted marshmallow, which are pretty much versions of buff titanium. The paints do have some granulation, but not a lot, especially the espresso paint, a bit in the peppermint mocha if you have a close look, and toasted marshmallow is more granulating than foam. You can see that these paints have very decent pigmentation, especially when you pre-wet them before you start painting. If you spritz them lightly with water and let them soak it in for a minute or two, they're going to perform much better. Espresso is a color which is quite difficult to re-wet and quite difficult to get a dark, intense layer of. In terms of dispersion, you can see that the paints, apart from peppermint mocha and pumpkin spice latte, don't move that much in the water. Campfire Glow disperses quite nicely. Rachel Beth usually arranges her paints into sets, into thematic sets of 4 or 5 colors. I think she's doing a marvelous job when it comes to making palettes and thinking up names for them. This is quite amazing because firstly, the colors within each set will really work together, and you can just use them as they are and you can create something interesting. And the sets themselves, for me, they just spark inspiration just by the fact that the colors are arranged together. For example, Let's Go Camping, you look at these colors, you look at the names: Toasted Marshmallow, Campfire Glow, Fresh Pine, Blue Spruce and Midnight Sky. And this instantly gives you an idea, could give you an idea of what to paint next. Rachel sells her paints in tiny, cute tins. You can buy these either in sets of different colors or in single pans. And recently Rachel also introduced a way to buy samples. She introduced dot cards into her shop. She's got a shop on Etsy. I'm going to leave a link to the shop in the description of the video. Blue Spruce reminds me of Cobalt Turquoise a lot, and if you look closely, it does seem to have that cobalt granulation Midnight Sky is a version of Indigo, and as expected it doesn't have much granulation. And have a look at that deep ocean. It's a lovely blue with nice granulation. I really like it. Probably I used this last set choosing the sand the most out of all of these. Okay, have a look at the first swatch sheet. As you can see in the layering test right here, in the glazing test, they are opaque, but still you can work quite nicely with layers. Now let's have a look and see if these rub off the paper or stay put. My finger got a little bit dirty, but it's not too bad. And when you take a look, there's no visible change on the paper. So if you're careful, everything should be alright even if you're working in a sketchbook. Now let's move on to the next swatch sheet. Now, Pink Shell and Sandy Beach are two really interesting colors. If you go back a little and have a look at when we swatched them, they looked pretty pale and whitish. They had this chalky appearance when I painted with them, and they seemed that they're going to dry very opaque. Now have a look at them. Pink Shell is about as opaque as Blue Spruce, and Sandy Beach, it's quite transparent. This is interesting because when the paints dried, they got much more transparent than you could have expected from the look of them when they were wet. And there's one more interesting thing about Pink Shell and Sandy Beach, because normally what you expect when you paint with watercolors is that they're going to be darker when they're wet and they're going to dry a little bit lighter. And it's exactly the opposite. If you go back a little, you'll see that both Pink Shell and Sandy Beach were quite light, whitish and chalky. And now Pink Shell turned into this light but quite intense pink, like candy pink. And it developed a pretty interesting texture. And Sandy Beach is much more brown than it was when we painted with it. Have a look at the layering test at the bottom. While these paints do have a slight chalky appearance, okay, maybe not that slight, they are darker than you could have expected. So I'm going to give you a closer look at the swatch sheets now. And have a look at the layers and the dispersion test here at the bottom. And here the second swatch sheet. Here we go. Just look at that blue spruce. Isn't it a lovely colour? Well, it's got these funny reddish particles. I think we're going to move on to conclusion. So here we are. Now let me tell you this. The paints from Designs by Rachel Beth are very decent. They're not the highest quality among all of the other handmade watercolors I have, but they are quite well pigmented, they are pretty easy to work with, and they're definitely not the most expensive. They're a lot more economical than other handmade paints I have, and I think they're a pretty good place to start your adventure with handmade watercolors, especially if you don't want to fork out a lot of money at the very beginning. Again, I'm going to leave the link to Rachel Beth's Etsy shop in the description of this video. Okay, that's it. Next week you can expect another review video, but I'm not going to tell you who the maker is going to be. Visit Hungry for Paint on Instagram and you're going to have a chance at a guessing game. If these paints look interesting to you, make sure to check out my other video about them. There's a mixing and color comparison video I made about Rachel Beth's paints up on my channel right now. If you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe to Hungry for Paint so you don't miss any future reviews, and consider supporting Hungry for Paint on Ko-fi. Thanks for watching. See you next week. Bye!